You're listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, with service members from across the military sharing their stories of combat and survival. And now, here's your host, Mark Zinno.
Welcome into the Hazard Ground Podcast. As always, we appreciate you joining us each and every week. Super excited for another episode about the Battle of Kamdesh and COP Keating. Stay tuned. It's coming up. We also wanted to wish everybody a happy new year. So thankful that you guys have been with us through this journey as we approach the 4-year anniversary of this podcast. And this week is episode 200. We couldn't have done this without you guys, and we are super appreciative of all the support and love we've received from everybody who listens to this show every week. 200 episodes, who would have ever thought? We couldn't have done it without you guys. And since you're fans of this podcast, you may have just realized that the intro music was a little bit different. Yeah, we are upgrading things, but we also want to give some big credit to Silence and Light. Brad Thomas, who was a previous guest on the show, actually twice, back on episode 58 and 153, he is part of the band Silence and Light. They were generous enough to let us use their track on our intro. You can find their music through our website, hazardground.com. Just click on the list tab and scroll down to the music section, or head over to their website, silenceandlightmusic.com. So a big thanks to Brad Thomas and Silence and Light for helping us continue to improve the Hazard Ground Podcast. I want to say also a big thanks to everybody that's left us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. We've bumped it up by about 100, but we still got a ways to go to get to 1,000. So let's keep moving. More ratings, more reviews on Apple Podcasts. We can crack the top 100 podcasts on Apple. That is our next big goal, and only you guys can help us get there. So please tell a friend. Make sure you leave a rating and a review. As well, follow us on all the social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hazard Ground and Hazard Ground Podcast. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. And of course, as always, our Amazon promotion. Go to our website, hazardground.com. Click on that Amazon button at the bottom of the homepage or under the sponsors tab. You can do all your normal Amazon shopping. We'll get a percentage of what you guys spend, and then we'll donate a percentage of that back to the veterans charities that have been featured here on the show. So happy that you guys have joined us. We hope you had a wonderful, safe, and healthy new year. We continue to hope for a better 2021 than was 2020, and certainly we hope that you guys continue to make the Hazard Ground part of your weekly routine. And with that out of the way, super excited for this episode. Another tale from the movie The Outpost and COP Keating. This is an absolutely amazing story, and here it is. Joining us this week on the Hazard Ground Podcast is a retired U.S. Army sergeant who had 2 deployments, one to Iraq, one to Afghanistan. Most notably, he was involved in the Battle of Kamdesh at COP Keating in 2009. He went on to write a book about his tales called Rise, A Soldier, a Dream, and a Promise Kept. That promise led him not only through college football, but to the NFL. He is Daniel Rodriguez joining us on the Hazard Ground Podcast. Daniel, welcome, man. Good to talk to you, brother.
Thank you all so much for having me, man. It's an honor to be here.
All right. We have told this story several different times before, and we're excited to tell it again. I mean, honestly, there are 2 things since we've been doing this podcast that sort of stick out with me. Like, Takur Ghar and Kamdesh are sort of like the War on Terror's Black Hawk Down. They are those type of stories that really just can't be told enough. So we're so happy that you're willing to do this with us, man. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you all. No, it's kind of one of those things where, you realize that you went through something pretty significant, and it's cool to, share your side of it, and also just, carry on a lasting memory of friends and people who have sacrificed the ultimate price for this country. So, it's kind of an honor to share my side of things. So thank you again.
All right, let's start back at the beginning, because you sort of got into the Army at a very sort of precarious time in your life, right?
Yeah. I was 2006 during the Bush administration. I was a senior in high school. I'll even go back further to kind of the trajectory of where we're at. 9/11 happened when I was in 8th grade. So, I remember seeing the towers fall when I was in 8th grade in my 3rd period class. And ultimately the next 4 years of my life, were not consumed, but ultimately dictated by the war in Afghanistan and in Iraq at the time. So, kind of going from 8th grade, I grew up in the D.C. area, and then my 9th grade year, actually, my high school was shut down because of the D.C. sniper. So I had like this really random high school timeline of a little bit of, the terror threats with the Pentagon, some D.C. sniper stuff. And then my senior year of high school, 4 days after I graduated, my dad passed away of a heart attack. So I was kind of left in this position of, I kind of skated around the edges. I really didn't apply myself. I was anticipating on going to a community college because my grades weren't that good. And then after my father passed, it was just kind of like this eye-opening moment of, oh shit, like, you can't hide what you've been doing anymore, right? Like the exposure has been lifted. And just my father was a veteran. He was a Vietnam vet. He was infantry, and he was actually the athletic director at Quantico. So I grew up on Quantico.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So and my dad used to always tell me, he's like, don't be like me. If you join the Army, get a trade. He's like, nobody told me options going into Vietnam, this, that, and the other. I thought I was going to get drafted. I just went infantry. And when I was in the recruiter station at Fort Mepps in Fort Lee, Virginia, or at Mepps at Fort Lee, Virginia, I had this moment where, it kind of came down, and I was selecting my MOS, and I had an issue with the security clearance because I had admitted to smoking weed one time in high school. So,
you big dummy! You're never supposed to admit that.
They made me feel guilty about it. Like I was in this room at 18, and they're just like, and for those of you submitting for TS clearance for this, we will find out if you've done anything. So I was actually a major pothead, and I just made it seem I was an innocent. I tried it one night on graduation, like did an inhale type thing. And when I went to finalize my satellite communications going to Fort Huachuca, the lady was like, hey, you can't get this TS clearance that's authorized for this MOS. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? She's like, you have to resubmit in 6 months. And I was just, my dad had just died. Like I was already set on, I need to get the hell out of town. Like I'm joining the military and getting out. And I had this moment of just like, hearing my dad on my shoulder, like, don't go infantry. And then all I want to do is go infantry. And I tried to get a trade. And there was this hiccup of the security clearance. And I just asked the lady, I was like, do y'all have infantry? And I'll never forget it. I tell the story a few times. This black lady from Maryland. I mean, nails done to a T. Just the quintessential, like, just Southern black woman, Virginia. She like puts down the phone, looks over the computer. She's like, "You do realize we're in a time of war, don't you?" and it didn't dawn on me. I was just like, she's like, because I was like, "Do you have infantry?" And she just like puts her phone down, looks at me like, screech. She's like, "You do realize we're at a time of war?" I'm like, "Yes, ma'am." She's like, okay, makes a phone call, like does her thing on her computer. She's like, can you leave tomorrow? And I was like, that's more like it. So said yes and got back on a bus. My recruiter took me back to Stafford, Virginia, where I'm from, right outside Quantico. Took my mom and sister out to dinner. Said, hey, y'all, I joined the Army. And they're like, well, when do you leave? I said, tomorrow. I'm heading off to Fort Benning. And that was that. So I did.
What did they say?
They're pretty cut. I mean, it's one of those things, right? Like, what are you going to say to your son that's 18, just lost a father? My parents also didn't have the strongest marriage going into my high school years. So I had a little bit of resentment and animosity towards my mother anyway. So I think that there was a barrier of like, look, I'm going to do what I want. This is kind of where I need to do. So truthfully, looking back on it, my mom is a warrior. Just having lost a husband, regardless of the situation, it was still somebody she loved. And then your son tells you he's joined the infantry and goes off 3 weeks later. I'm sure it was pretty difficult for my mom and sister to wrap their head around it. And then I graduated basic, and 24 days after that, I was a replacement soldier to Iraq. So wow. Literally, I had orders to go to Iraq before I even got out of basic training. I was sent to Fort Carson, Colorado for 3 weeks of whatever it's like, integration. I literally left basic, went home for a week, flew to Fort Carson, trained for 3 weeks, flew home for a week, and then went to Iraq. Like bang, bang, bang.
Nuts.
So yeah, it was pretty quick, and I was exposed pretty early on. But that's kind of like the synopsis of what triggered me, kind of the events of my childhood, and also influence of my father. And yeah, ultimately, carrying on the lineage of an infantry soldier and joining, during 2006 during the Bush administration and saw some stuff overseas is pretty wild.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious. Not that you should have regret about the way you did it, but and your career obviously worked out, in the long run to your benefit. But would you have gone back and do it differently if you could? Would you have had some different conversations with your family? Would you have thought about a more deliberate path and tried to go through a different career?
Yeah, I think so. I think, as I mature, especially I've always been very quick and decisive in decisions that I made. And I think with maturity kind of comes for me at least, the ability to kind of comprehend and see the big picture. And I think at 18, I didn't have a bigger picture then. I only had the bandwidth of what I'd been exposed to at that time. So I don't regret it or resent it, but it was definitely something that I jumped into. And also, that is a kind of difficult question. I can make a summary on both cases of yes, I regret it, and no, I don't. Right, but ultimately, like it was right for me at the moment. Maybe I would have done a little bit more research. Maybe I wanted a special forces contract going in. I didn't know little things like that, like get your classes. I went into a recruiter station, and I literally, when I walked in, I didn't even know National Guard was a thing. So when I walked in the recruiter station, and this is a true story. The Air Force, I was going to join the Air Force because I had already done my research. I read that they had better pay, cost of living. Their duty stations were a little bit more over the place. I was like, okay, I'll do Air Force. They were on a lunch break, and I walked directly across the hall to the Army recruiter station because he was eating his lunch in there. Like, that's how anxious and ready I was. Like, I'm doing this. I'm committing to it. So,
Daniel, you don't know how many people I've interviewed on this podcast, and that is their recruiting story. I wanted to be a Marine, but when I showed up, that guy wasn't there, and so boom. I wanted to go to the Navy. That guy wasn't there. The Marine was there. Boom. I'm in the it's amazing. And I thought I was like stupid when I entered the Army because I went ROTC, but I had no idea what the hell I was doing, right? Like I didn't know my elbow from my ass as far as the Army was concerned. But it makes me almost feel like, okay, I understand. Yeah, there's a lot of us who kind of go in there and have no idea what the hell we're doing, right? We pick what's in front of us.
Absolutely. And it was wild too, because I remember the conversation. And the reason I brought up I didn't know National Guard existed because when I walked in the recruiter station, he's like, how can I help you? What are you looking to do? I was like, I want to join the Army. And he goes, are you trying to do reserve or active duty? And I remember like, what? And he goes, do you want to be full-time or part-time? I said, I responded, I want to jump out of airplanes and I want to be stationed in Europe. And he goes, son, sign right here. We can make that happen. It was just one of those things. And I thought I was going to go to basic, be able to stand out, pick my duty station, all this. That's what I thought came with me enlisting. And I was wrong. I enlisted again during a time of war, and I was Uncle Sam's,
bitch,
pawn, if you will. So yeah, for sure. So I went in there thinking having all these high. So to your question, like, do I regret anything of sort? I would have done more research on making sure I entered in getting what I wanted out of the Army, not entering in and they getting what they want out of me. And sure. I think that is kind of like a fine line to, if I had to really harp on it. But yeah, I went in naive. And what even made it worse, when I got home from Iraq, because I was livid. I was livid when I got to basic, and my drill sergeant literally laughed in my face when I was like, hey, I was told by my recruiter, if I'm like stand out in PT, like I'm a good squared away soldier, you guys would, offer me a Ranger contract. Bro, I have never been laughed at in front of my face so hard. Like, oh, you got lied to, fucking pride. You got fucking lied to. Wow. Ain't nobody sending your ass to Ranger school. You got to do that shit before you get in the Army, dumbass. And they ragged on me, graduated basic, went to Iraq, or graduated basic, came home on that week window I told you about before I went to Carson. And I went to go give that piece of shit a piece of my mind, really. I went in there to go to that recruiter station, but hey, fuck boy, you remember me lying my ass? and I went in there and I asked them, I was like, I can't remember the guy's name. I was like, Master Sergeant so-and-so. I was like, blah, blah, retired. Like literally just trying to make a quota. He was already out. That was his last station in his, in his repertoire, if you will, type thing, just meeting a quote. So I just felt like during that timeline, me being a naive 18-year-old, like, I kind of was just kind of pushed through and told what, somebody wanted to tell me, saw me coming a mile away. So if I could do it over again, and that's what I encourage people now when, people ask me to join the military, I'm like, one, make sure you know what you want, you get out of it, and you do your research, whether you're going to go to school, green and gold, you want enlisted, just make sure you know all your options like anything else before you just go in there and enlist like I did. So it's kind of wild. You live and you learn. But yeah, man, I had a pretty funny road getting in and how I got there and what I ultimately became out of it.
So you get to Iraq quicker than your head can spin. Are you having any regrets at that point going, what the hell did I get myself into?
Yes, actually. Because it was,
I mean, did the first thought in your head go, that lady at the recruiting station who said, you didn't know we're at war, right? Yeah, she was right.
Yeah, no, it was weird because when I touched down, it wasn't really, I'll tell you what killed me was this was like the booming age of like MySpace and Facebook. Like this was when really, I feel like social media culture in the Facebook era was kind of like being more prominent, because I went there, kind of just doing my job, a little bit unsure, but I would see my friends that had literally were on the same trajectory. They were just finishing their first semester of college as I graduate basic, and I'm heading off to Iraq when they're heading for their sophomore or their second semester of school. And I'm seeing all their Facebook posts of them going to parties and this shit. Like that was more difficult for me, because it's like, what am I doing? Like, your sirens are going off. I was in Camp Rustamaya in Sadr City in Baghdad. Like I was in the
that's not a good place to be.
I was in the shittiest spot of Baghdad during I was a surge soldier. So I went over there with 9 months left as an attachment soldier, and our unit ended up doing 15 months. So I did a year like as a replacement soldier without leave. And so like by the end of that tour, I was like, I came back a specialist. Like I was maxed out on stuff. Like I never really got hazed as in the garrison life, because I was already, I already had a combat patch coming back as, so like there were some pros and cons to it deploying early on, but yeah, there was definitely some times where I was like, man, like this is crazy. Like this is some shit. And then my downtime when I try to, email somebody or check something is like just a whole 180 spectrum of what I could be doing or what my friends are doing. So there were definitely times of like, what the fuck am I doing right now? Like, especially, the first time I saw somebody killed or, something blown up, it's just moments where you're like, okay, this is real, right? Like there are evils in this world, and you have committed yourself, to fighting that and being in this realm. So, I've always had the attitude and mindset instilled in me. You commit to what you do. You give it everything you have, etc. And that was no different. So when I knew that I was in the combat zone and shit was real, I don't think I regretted it. It was just more or less just like this is the avenue you've chosen. So make the most of it. Let's do it. Let's do it and get out of here. So that was kind of like the mindset. But definite times of jealousy and like, damn, what the hell, when I would see my friends at college like posting shit. That was the biggest thing.
No, yeah, I mean, listen, I was there 05 to 06, so that was the beginning of the Facebook sort of boom, right?
Yeah.
I remember I had no idea what the hell it was. I just kept seeing things float around on the internet about it. But yeah, you talk about the operational tempo when you were there in 07 as, you're getting to the height of the violence of what's going on.
Yeah.
Are you ever really prepared for that? Like, did you think going in, again, you knew you were at war, you knew bad stuff was going to happen, but are you ever really prepared for what you saw?
No, I don't think so. I think it's weird because I think as an American culture, we do romanticize war.
Oh yeah. Too much, so, probably.
Yeah. And again, my father was an Army vet. So I grew up in a very like John Wayne, Clint Eastwood era Westerns and Green Beret-esque and Saving Private Ryan movies. So I think in some weird way, like I was maybe acclimated in one facet because I kind of grew up with like seeing the imagery of it. But no, I don't think you can really prepare for that shit when you see it in real life. You know what I mean? Like it was like because I don't try to sugarcoat it. It's like, it was like this movie. No, like I can't. Like even though I may have seen that or have had, exposure to what a reenactment might be, when you really see something like that, when you really see somebody dying or bleeding out, or it's fucked, right? Like it's extremely different and it's daunting, and it's hard to. I think that's one of the hardest things about being a soldier. Really, was losing a friend or somebody getting injured, and then you have to go back out on mission either later that day or like the next day, and like nothing happened. Like I had our buddy Snell was killed, and we went to a ceremony. And as soon as the ceremony was done, we were loading up our Humvees to go back out on mission. And that is where, for me, is like the fuck game, because it's like, like right. How do you keep a even keel and, demonstrate that you're not thinking about your friend that was just killed yesterday?
Let me ask you about the guys you lost in Iraq. I mean, you didn't really have a chance to make any friends, right? Because you were, as you mentioned, you were a fill-in. You were a backfill.
Yeah.
I mean, you get on ground, you're a brand new, private PFC, whatever it may be, and all you're trying to do is fit in and survive at the same time. And I know you said you didn't have to go through any of the hazing or anything, but what was that integration like for you, just trying to sort of find your way while trying to survive at the same time?
It was actually really, it was really difficult in a weird way, because I'm a very personable person. Yeah, it's hard. Like it's very rare that I just have this energy where I'm just not gonna like you from the get go. Like that's just not something I try to always like be friendly. I was an athlete. I was always on sports. I was always on teams. Like I understand the chemistry and the dichotomy of don't overstep your boundaries. Don't be just kind of ease yourself in. But what was really difficult about that shit is I was replacing one of their friends, man. Like I was replacing a kid named Alan B. James from Texas. Never met the kid. 21, died at 21, roadside bomb, and fought in Iraq. I was his replacement soldier. So their boy that they went through JTC with, Fort Polk, all this shit for a year, and then they deploy with, and they lose him on month 3. And here comes this kid out of basic training to come sleep in the same bed that he was just in, 3-4 weeks ago. So as much as like I came in with my personality, there was still the atmosphere of like, you're the replacement to our boy, right? So like there, I was sleeping in the bunk that belonged to their buddy. Like, I was in a truck. I was getting, there was this, and so there was that, and then there was also the privates that were going on PFCs and specialists that had been hazed in garrison for all that time, and we're finally in Iraq. And here comes me, and all our sergeants are saying, "No, you can't fuck with them like that. No, we're in theater now. That shit doesn't slide anymore." So I had like all these like hazing hungry PFCs and specialists that just wanted to fuck with me, and they couldn't just because, I mean, they still did, like they pulled pranks on me and stuff, but like to the extent of what your cherries usually are, like it was just a very weird fit for me, like the vibrancy, because I came in replacing a good friend. None of them could haze me. Like, and we were going out on mission. When I got the helicopter landed at Rustamaya, flew in at night. That next morning, my sergeant came to get me. Like I was writing down on literally he took me in before mission. He's like, can you dismount or gun? I'm like, bro, I just got out of basic training. What the hell? You're like, I don't know. Like, and I tell him, I'm like, I can do it all. And so they put me on a gunner. And before we go out on a mission, he's like, look, man, I just need you to write down like where you're from, like some stuff, what you do. And he laughed about it, but he goes, because if you die today, we literally know nothing about you. I just like laughed, but I was like, this is real. I'm about to go out on mission. Like, and yeah, it was, they teach you in basic, like every piece of trash is an IED. And, I get to bet the entire country is one big landfill. And you're just like, oh God, like everything's going to blow up. So it was just like this adjustment and like, just, it was wild, but I really got thrown into the mix, which I think may have been to my benefit. The trial by fire is kind of how I adjust anyway. Like, I'd rather kind of see what it's about and be exposed to it and go from there, not just anticipate an uncertainty. But yeah, I was, from the enlistment day to my first day in Baghdad, I was definitely utilized for all my resources possible. I was on mission the first day I got to Iraq, etc. So it was a unique time to fit in and bond with a platoon that you didn't know. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you had to go clear houses and be in a Humvee, like you guys have been boys all along. So it's an interesting fit for that time.
Interesting that you remember the name and where the individual was from of the guy you replaced.
Bro, I mean, yeah, in a weird way, it's like I never met him, but like, my best friend, one of my best friends, Tito, that was like me and him, like, and he even tells it in, we've met up a few years ago, and he even tells it in a weird way too. He's like, yeah, man, he's like, I didn't want to like you. He's like, I didn't want to like you because I didn't want to get close to something. Like, and James was his best friend. Like him and Alan B. James were best friends. So me and Tito, like, we ended up becoming best friends and like living together when we got back to garrison. Like, he was my homie. So it was just like, hearing it from his side too. Like, he was like, man, this guy's kind of cool, but they were all giving me a hard time because it was just like, I get it. You know what I mean? I get it from their side too. So it's like, you really can't be anything other than just understanding of the situation. So yeah, it was kind of a weird time, but again, like, it's a soldier's mentality, and it's only soldiers that can have endured that can kind of understand what that feeling's like, and introducing somebody else that you really don't know and might lose sooner than later. So it's kind of I mean that this all contributes to the post traumatic stress of things, right?
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's a wild mental game.
Well, it's all compounding, right? I mean, none
sure.
of it's hard to compartmentalize any of it without bringing some of it with you, right? I mean, it doesn't work that way. Somehow all these events are connected and they compound one another, small and big. And sometimes it's multiple small ones that add up to a big one. And sometimes it's just a big one where another small event ends up pushing you to a place where you didn't know you had to be or want to go. So I think it's an important distinguishment to make. Let me ask you, you get back from Iraq. You think you have a total of about 15 months of career Army in you. You had talked about how when you got there, you're like, oh, what the hell did I get myself into? Did you think at this point, when you get back from Iraq, you're like, as soon as my enlistment is done, I'm out of this, I'm done with the Army? Or did you feel like maybe this was going to be a long-term career for you? I'm just curious on your mindset when you return.
When I kind of went into it, I anticipated kind of being a lifer. I did, not a lifer. There was just objectives that I wanted to go to Ranger School. I wanted to come back. I wanted to do a lot of things. But after the first deployment, are you saying after my 4 years?
Yeah, no, I mean, after your first deployment, when you get back, what's your mindset? Like, did you think, because you had said earlier that, you almost didn't know what you got yourself into as you're landing in Iraq. I mean, did you think at this point in time you were going to do your 4 years and be out, or did you have plans on? Because a lot of times after deployments, guys get reinvigorated and they want to stay.
Yeah, no, I want to make sure I answer the question right, because yes, no, so it's weird because I think Iraq kind of transformed me during the deployment, and I would probably say more of liability kind of way, mm-hmm. I guess. I think I came back a liability, and let me explain. And it's I endured what I did. My deployment in Iraq was rough. My Afghanistan deployment is rough, obviously, but bro, Baghdad was fucking crazy. I mean, it was nuts. Half the roads we couldn't even leave. This is how wild we would leave the JSS, our FOB Rustamaya. We had to get escorted by EOD to and from, and they would leave us at a joint security site for 5 days, and we'd rotate out with our other sister companies. So when we left FOB Rustamaya, we wouldn't come back because the roads were too hot. We would set up shop in the middle of Sadr City, at the JSS, a police security site, live with Iraqi nationals, police nationals, and run missions in our parameter around the bases, because that's how wild it was. So we didn't even really exist on the base, but for 2 days at a time. All that being said, is when I get home from my deployment, I was 20 years old. I had just turned 20. I literally turned 20 the day we got back. So I had a year to go where all my buddies were getting fucked up, drinking, going home, celebrating, and I couldn't even legally go out with my friends. I was so bitter at the U.S. I was absolutely pissed off. I was like, you go through I'm over there fighting for our fucking country. I'm losing friends. You guys aren't even letting me serve a fucking beer, blah, blah. Can't even buy a handgun. I'm literally on mission for a year. I can't come back and get a carry concealed permit. I'm freaking out. You mean I can't have a gun on me now? So I came back. I kind of came back pretty wild. And it kind of got consumed into the lifestyle with other soldiers of that mentality. So to answer your question, was I eager to do my 4 years after I got home from Iraq? No. But I knew I still had 3 years left in my contract, so I was just going to do what I had to do. Right. And, I really didn't think too much of it. And, I was training full time. I was E4 promotable coming back, so I was fast tracking. And I just kind of got caught up in the soldier lifestyle, not in a bad way. I was just, I was a soldier. I would go out, drink with my buddies, you get shit faced, 6 a.m. formation, you're there, and you just kind of, you walk that walk and you kind of do your thing. So I really wasn't anticipating getting out at that point. I was just kind of fulfilling my contract and just, just being with my battle buddies, right? That was all I really had. So, I was kind of just making the most of my situation and training every day. Now, when I came home from Afghanistan, we'll get there in time, but when I came home from Afghanistan, halfway through my deployment, I was telling myself, nope, no reenlistment out of this guy. I am done. Like, I am done with this shit. So, you know, I definitely had two wavelengths of impact from events that took place overseas that kind of that, because here's the even crazier thing, not to get ahead of in Afghanistan, but I got slotted for Ranger School because I was going to be stop loss. So I had 27 months of combat and only 21 months of garrison. So I had more time overseas. I was going to have more time overseas than I did stateside when my contract was up.
Wow.
But I was going to hit stop loss in January. So this is like a year out from this time. So I'm already, me and like 5 other guys that came in together, we're all on the same regiment. We're all going to be stop loss in January, halfway through our deployment. We had to finish out our deployment, 3-month stabilization. So I knew I was going to be screwed for like almost another year in the Army from my actual ETS date. So a year and a half out from that moment, I re-enlisted. So I re-enlisted for 2 years to get a Ranger School. I got shafted out of my Ranger School for an officer because they told me that I didn't have time to recycle if I were to get hurt, whatever. And I ended up deploying, and when I came back, like I said, I wanted to kind of go through different ranks and all this stuff and kind of do all that stuff. But after that, like kind of going through that motion, kind of re-enlisting to get out of the stop loss situation, and the Army still didn't do that to me. And then enduring what's ultimately the bloodiest battle ever in the war in Afghanistan, I was like, nah, I'm done. Like there's some things that I can take and tolerate where I wanted my future to go.
Right. After
Keating and all that, I didn't want anything to do with it. I felt like I had done my duty. I had honorably served my time that I committed to, and I was completely okay with walking away and not doing anything again. And for that time, so those are kind of like two different scenarios. But coming home from Iraq, I really wasn't thinking about it, and I was also even my friends will tell you, like, we reflect on it. They're like, yeah, you were kind of crazy, bro. Like, there was a little bit of a short fuse, like chip on my shoulder. You come back from a war zone type thing. It's a different mentality. Yeah, and I was 19. Again, I was 19, just turned 20. So just, it was a lot to throw on a kid, really. And, so it's just kind of, even thinking about it now, it's kind of scary, but also, humbling that I've been able to make it this far and, be able to reflect and get positive things out of it now. Right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right. You brought up Afghanistan. It's your second deployment. How much time between your first and your second were you actually back stateside? Not long, right?
Yeah, exactly 1 year.
Oh, wow.
Exactly 1 year. Mm-hmm.
Now, is this the same unit that you're redeploying with, or did you switch units?
Mm-hmm. Oh, no, same unit. So we reflag. Here's even crazy. We were in whatever main air base in Kuwait or Iraq, Qatar, coming back. Like deployment was over, and they were already telling us that we were coming back to. They already told us that our unit was going to Afghanistan. We already knew before I even stepped foot on American soil to get back from my first deployment that I was already deploying in a year to Afghanistan. And how we knew that was happening is because I deployed as second ID. So my unit started in Korea. They were in Korea, and they deployed directly from Korea to Ramadi in 2004, 2005. And they went from Korea to Ramadi as second ID. And then once their deployment in Ramadi was done, they didn't go back to Korea. They went straight to Carson. So so the unit went to Carson. Then they went back to Iraq, and that's where I met them at 2 months into that tour, is when I came out of basic training. And then we went from Iraq back to Carson as second ID again. But as soon as we touched down in Carson as second ID, a month later, we had a change of color ceremony or change of guard, and Fort Carson actually went to all fourth ID, light infantry and mechanized. So unit was the same. Everything was the same. We just ripped off the second ID patch on our unit side and put the fourth ID patch on. So when I went to Afghanistan, it was my fourth ID. It was a fourth ID. It was the infantry division, fourth ID, but it was same platoon, same guys. Everything was the same. So just different combat patch.
Wow.
That's
interesting.
how it was. Yeah.
I'll start Afghanistan this way. You talked about being in Sadr City. And again, for those civilians listening, Sadr City is just take any sort of, for lack of a better term, bad neighborhood in any urban city that you can think of. And Sadr City is about 1,000 times worse. So you're there for this deployment in Iraq. We've talked repeatedly with other folks who we've interviewed, both Stoney Portis and Andrew Bunderman, about Cobb Keating and what a strategic bleeping mess it was to put a combat outpost there from every sort of tactical standpoint, and yet the government decided to do it. So the question is, where did you feel more unsafe, Cobb Keating or Solder City?
That's a tough one. I think physically that's a good question, because I think physically I was more in fear in Baghdad.
Yeah, I thought that's what you were going to say.
and it's more or less just like the style of fight. Like,
right. Well, it's urban warfare, right?
Yeah, Baghdad was a toe-to-toe fight. Yeah, you get cracked at, but I'm in the mountains expecting the enemy to come out of the mountains. When you're in a city, you're not expecting the enemy just to blow up the street or shoot out of an apartment complex, where there's kids playing soccer in the street. So, yeah.
Well, and that too, I think in Afghanistan, you kind of had a better idea of who the enemy was. Yeah, exactly. Necessarily. As you mentioned, there were civilians walking around who were bad guys in Baghdad, and you had no idea that they were.
No clue. Yeah, I remember some of our missions out of that JSS. We would work with. This was like, I'm sure I know technology is better, but we were working with Air Force and JTAC, and we'd have a JTAC guy in our trucks with us in our convoy, and they'd have the whatever planes up 30,000+ feet, and they'd be pinging. We do HVT missions. That's what I did. I'd kick down doors, rooftop to rooftop, entire city blocks, coming on helicopter, everything, fucking city streets. And the JTAC would be pinging we would get a cell phone signal within 10 feet of our hit list targets when their phones would go off, and we'd be rolling out of our own JSS, going out on mission, and the JTAC guy's like, I have 3 pings within 10 feet of us. It's like you're sleeping with the guys who are alerting the enemy. So, like, it was just like this mental game. You're just like, where Afghanistan, like, again, I'm in an isolated base with 2,000 rounds of ammo and a 240. Nobody's going to say shit to me. Like, come attack me, I'm going to sling these rounds at you. Right. In Baghdad, it was like, ROE, where did it come from? Like, a ton of shit. It was just it was mental. It was a head case. I didn't like it at all. I really felt unsafe. I saw my first EFP like 3 months in. I mean, 2 of the guys in the same. I knew one of the guys in the truck that was killed. 2 of the guys had the same last name. You couldn't even tell who they were in the truck, bro. Could not tell who either was. It was so bad. What I like to the question, the earlier question. Can you really be? No, you can't. It was bad. It was bad, man. And like, and you see stuff like that, and it's like, wait, that was the fucking gunner? Like, that was the driver? Like, holy shit, you see these EFPs going through Bradleys, and you're like, the fuck? Like, what am I doing?
Yeah, that was a different level of fear if you had to drive on the roads like I did.
Yeah, oh man, hell yeah, dude. I did not like that shit at all. So, yeah, right. No, I was probably more scared in Baghdad, truthfully.
When do you get to Cobb Keating?
I was the first bird in, bro. I would say, so me, Romache, I think, Portis wasn't with us yet. He came later. Breeding. So I was the lead gunner. So there were 6 of us that went into Keating on the first bird. I touched down in Bostic. I was only in Fort Fob Bostic for 8 hours. I left that night. So I went literally doing touchdown in Bostic, grabbed my shit. I was on the first bird out. So I was the first crew in Keating that morning. I was probably I'd say April. So probably April, May, June, July. Probably like June, maybe. Okay. May or June, something like that. It was right at the beginning of the deployment. Like, I spent all my time at Keating. Like, when I got to Afghanistan, I was in, Kandahar for maybe a few days. And then Bostic was our little situation. Then it was a 45-minute Chinook ride from Bostic to Keating. Then I was on the first bird out that night. So I was one of the first groups that woke up, because when you come into the valley at night, you can't see anything. I got your nods on, but it's complete darkness. And then you kind of see the water. You can see the terrains a little bit. It was like, are we trying to land this Chinook on a putting green? I was like, what the hell is going on? I'm looking at this terrain below us. I'm like, what the fuck? And then the sun comes up the next morning, and it's just like, whoa. Like, yeah, again, I'm not in charge. I'm not I don't pride myself in being a strategic tactician, but 101, take the high ground, right?
Yeah, well, that was the point. You didn't need to be a strategic tactician to realize this was a really shitty idea.
Yeah, and you see the switchbacks going up, and we had another sister COP called Fritchie, which was on the top of the mountains, but we couldn't see it. Like, and the one which was really, again, strategically stupid is the 155s didn't even reach Bostic. So we were out of our own range of our 155s. So our only indirect support was ourselves or Fritchie, and we couldn't see Fritchie. Like, so it was all just by like word of mouth. If we were getting attacked, they'd hit us. If they were getting attacked, we'd hit them. So it was just like, even the game within the game, us two being together, we really couldn't even support ourselves that efficiently or effectively, if anything. And, it ultimately did. But yeah, like just getting there the first day, like seeing, the setup where the pit was at, where the guys were eating, you knew it was going to be, it was an outpost. You knew it was going to be, rough conditions, but rough conditions and bad, bad defense are two different things, right? Like,
right.
I can be cold and shit, but if I'm in the high ground and know that I'm at least in an advantage, it makes you sleep better at night. We literally had Constantine wire 3 feet from where we slept. That was literally right on the edge of the switchbacks. Like, it was just, I mean, we were in the mountain. It was so wild, bro. Like, now I'm like kind of even elaborating on it. Like, it was nuts.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the pictures. Put me there. I look at the pictures and I just wonder, the only thing that anybody's ever said from a strategic standpoint is to be able to engage with the local civilian population in that area because nobody else was there. But at the end of the day, there's a reason nobody else was there, right? Like, it should have told you that. It's like, the whole idea of, you can walk down the lighted street or you can walk down the dark alley. Well, you know what? If you're going to end up at the same spot, I'll take the lighted street, not the dark alley, because common sense tells you otherwise. All right. So what's life like every single day there for the most part leading up to October? I mean, what's the amount of enemy contact you're seeing? Do you have any losses up to then?
No, we had one injury. So during the transition, in and out, actually, it's really crazy. The unit we replaced was out of Fort Hood. And I don't know if you remember that when they had that crazy ass mass shooting, like in Fort Hood, like back in 2000, whatever, it'd been like 2010. That was the unit we replaced. So like these dudes just went through this horror tour and they go back to their reintegration. And that's when that whole Fort Hood thing happened during their in processing back. So pretty crazy times in the Army. But yeah, I get there and it was pretty regular. I mean, we got attacked the very first morning. I was in flip-flops and shooting back. I was in flip-flops and a K-pot shooting back. And why? Because everybody else around me was in flip-flops and like a t-shirt just shooting back. So I was exposed pretty early on that, okay, they're going to show force, they're going to hit you. The guys are warning you. They're like, hey, they like to attack during the first thing in the morning, right at night. So they're kind of giving you the lay of the land and the ammo points. You're just like kind of assessing the situation. But for me, I was at so 361 is a cav unit, so it's all cavalry scout. I was infantry. I was a mortar guy, so I was attached to I was an infantry guy attached to a cavalry unit when I was in Afghanistan. So when I got to the base, the mortar pit, we called it Mortaritaville. There was only 3 of us that were mortars attached to this company, so we literally had to man the gun 24/7. Like we had a guy on radio up. We'd rotate shift all the time, so we had to sleep with our socks on because we were our only indirect fire. So I didn't have to go out on mission, and I really didn't leave my compound too much when we were first there, only to get food and stuff. But it was living was pretty shit. It was the summertime over there, so it was pretty hot. 1 meal a day. We had a wire purifier. We had to turn off our electricity. I think we went like 2 months without electricity, like other than generator issued stuff. So, it was just pretty desolate and just kind of slinging rounds back and forth. Like, you trap rainwater in the ammo buckets to take showers type shit. Like, but I would say the contact was pretty sporadic. We probably get attacked like 2-3 times a week, more or less. I'd say we averaged. And, but it was just like, it was kind of common. I don't know. It was weird because you fall back into this like comfortability of being attacked. Like right. you adapt to the tendencies or where you're getting hit from, or okay, be prepared, or they're not going to attack during prayer, things like that. So you kind of like start acclimating and adjusting. But for those who've been on an outpost life in the Hindu Kush Mountains, I would say it's probably all kind of in the same day to day and feel. But we got attacked pretty good.
Well, again, I think
ahead.
there's a part to that too that you're bringing up that can't be underscored, because everything that we did in either Iraq or Afghanistan was a constant game of chess, right? It was just TTPs back and forth. I mean, you talked about the EFPs before. Well, once we started welding, armor to the bottom of Humvees and we came up with better armor, well, the enemy had to figure out a way to start penetrating that, and that's how EFPs were. And part of what had happened, at least in the write-ups from your superiors who talked about what had happened at the Battle of Kamdesh, was that the constant small attacks that they kept giving you allowed them to pick up on how the United States forces reacted, and then they could build off an attack, a bigger attack off that. And so complacency plays a big part in this.
Oh, 100%. And I was kind of leading up to that in terms of the mundaneness of the day-to-day, because I felt like the sporadic gunfires, exactly to that point, like in the grand scheme of things, they're sizing it. They're seeing our SOPs. They're saying, okay, how long do they stay out on their guns after we attack them? Where are they running from? Where are their sleeping quarters? So I completely agree with that in terms of us just kind of being harassed more or less to see what our weaknesses were in the long run. And that's kind of what it was. And I've said this before, in that complacency thing, like the U.S., I think the U.S. is so confident in our military at this time, at this point. Like that was almost a weakness for us, because I feel myself and any other guy on that post, bring it on. Like, we got night vision and all this other shit. Like I'm not scared of the fight, but I think that confidence and bravado, doing it over and over again, set us up to be very vulnerable, and especially on top of where we were at. So, it's definitely one of those things where it was a chess match, us versus them, and they definitely were. They're sizing us up to see what our moves were, to see our tendencies, and they took advantage of it when they had the chance. So, it's kind of it was super unfortunate and horrific, but in the terms of warfare, they had a pretty good game plan coming at us, if you will.
All right, you go to bed on the night of October 2nd, 2009. Is it a normal night? I mean, do you have watch duty the first thing in the morning? What are you thinking of doing before you go to bed?
Yeah, no, it's pretty standard. I mean, we had ICOM chatter for like a month leading up to it, where we'd go down and get sit reps. That would be situational reports. That would just, talk about these overrunning and, 300 plus soldiers, this, that, and the other. I mean, you were literally intercepting these conversations that they're having in the mountaintops. And I look back on it just like, I guess you just want to believe it. Like that they're just, because you would get out of a firefight and then you would get the ICOM chatter, and they'd be saying, killed 3 Americans, successful attack. And none of that shit was true. Like, they didn't kill anybody. Like, why are they, So you just think they're giving each other, like, energy to feed off of. So when you start hearing all these attacks and stuff, you just start thinking to yourself, like, okay, they're just trying to mess with us just like they do saying they killed people when they didn't. And so, like, October 2nd was no different, man. Like, you get the situational report. You've been hearing it for a while. I had to be up first thing in the morning. We got to use the satellite communication computers. There was one down in the aid station, and I woke up before the sun because my buddy Thompson woke me up, and I had to go get chow, which was going to be served. So I was going to use the computer before I go get chow. So I walked down. I only have a pistol on me because I got to carry back 2 plates for the guys. So I walked down, and before I even get on the computer, as soon as daybreak comes, rockets start coming in. So the lead up to it was no different, man. I had a conversation with my buddy at LRAS 2, Mace. Just me and him were chatting real quick, had a good laugh. Then I walked down, and then 20 minutes later, and even when the income started coming in, I didn't feel it was too different until about a minute in. I realized that it was a little bit, because usually it's 3 to 4 RPGs, sporadic small fires. Then once we start shooting back, we might get another RPG, and we might take some sniper fire somewhere there. But then once you see splash or see spark, we're on it. This just didn't stop. I remember just you're waiting for the lull after the third or maybe the fourth RPG, right? You're just like, okay, when can I run? And I remember just constant shaking and just boom, boom. And then, it starts just kind of, okay, all right, well, I got to run to my post now. And I pull my 9mm out, charge it. And I just, as soon as I run out of the door, I thought to myself, I was like, I didn't think it was raining. Cause I just remember coming around the corner and I could just see little popcorn flickers looked like raindrops hitting the dirt. And I as soon as I come through and get out of the fatal funnel, out of that daybreak, and realize I step right around the corner and I get this sharp ass pain in my shin, right to the right of my leg. And that's when I realized, oh, these are somebody's shooting at me. This isn't rain, the fucking bullets hitting. It hit so close to me, it shot a rock up or something, ricocheted a rock, hit the ground right next to me and hit me in the calf, whatever it fucking hit. And I thought I'd been hit. I was like, what the fuck? And I'm running through this shit. And I look up into the switchbacks and I'm zigzagging, trying to yell, friendly as everybody's firing out. And I'm running battle run past the 50 cal. And I'm just yelling, friendly, friendly. And I'm looking up in the switchback. And then I start panicking because as vast as the mountain ridge was, I could see just nothing but muzzle flashes just coming out of everywhere. And
you're talking about when you're looking up, right? Yeah, you're looking up. All you're seeing.
I had an uphill run, to where my position was an uphill run, I came out, and when I realized that we were getting shot at, and I was yelling at LRAS 2 to cover me, and a friendly was coming in, is when I looked up to see, okay, where is he shooting? And when I looked up and just saw the muzzle flash, it kind of hit me. I was like, oh shit, oh shit. And so I just started shooting. I knew I had no chance of probably hitting anything with my 9mm, but I wasn't going to not shoot. So I just put my head down and just ran and zigzag and just started shooting. Pop, pop. Anytime I'd see muzzle flash, I just shoot at it, 1 or 2, put my head back down, 1, 2, shot. And I only had 1 mag on me. Went all through that, came up, got up to my fighting position. And my buddy Thompson, who was on the radios, who was the one who woke me up, he this entire ordeal from explosions to me getting to my base or to my position is probably maybe 90 seconds, maybe, felt like forever, but
right.
It may be. So by the time I get to my point, I'm huffing. I got blood. I got PT shorts on. I got blood coming out of my right leg or whatever the fuck hit me. And I don't even say shit to Thompson. He just sees me catching my breath, hands on my knees, 9mm is out, is done. And he just looks at me and it's we don't even say shit to each other. I can see it in his eyes, him looking at me and hearing everything this is intense. And I just yelled at him. I said, switchbacks, that's where we're getting hit from. And he proceeded to go in front of me, to get to his position. And he took maybe half a step past me to my left. And I didn't see it because I kind of had my hands on my knees, looking down. And I just saw out of the corner of my eye, I saw his rifle hit the ground, just the barrel go straight. It was in his hand. He just dropped it. So I just seen the barrel hit. And every soldier knows when you see a barrel hit the ground, it's not right. And so I just remember seeing that and what? And then just boom, just dropped right by my feet. And I figured I knew what was already. I knew it would happen. But I flipped it over. Do whatever they fucking teach you. Well, first they teach you to shoot back and secure the site or whatever. I just fucking went down to see what the fuck happened, and he'd been hit. He got hit in the head. Kind of went down. It was weird. It wasn't pretty at all. Kind of went through, and I think it went out his back is what I heard during the autopsy. Went hit his K-pot and went down. So went through his cheek essentially, and then out his back shoulder blade. His back, his back plate carry was just absolutely drenched in blood, just soaking. So I at first I knew he got hit in the head because I saw, but I didn't know where the exit was. And then it just when I heard that's what happened, I was like, yeah, it's fucking brutal. But yeah, he dropped. He dropped right in front of me, and then I just kind of snapped, bro. One of our other buddy was on leave. Hamill, our dude buddy from Maine, was literally had just flown back and was at Bagram. He was on the next flight out the next day to come back to Keating. And this is a fuck story. He's seeing American flags. He's getting news who the fuck's getting hit? Like, who are all these casualties? And why are these C-30s are taking out all these casualties? Like, bro, that's your unit. And so like my buddy missed this fight, had no idea, and he like shows up to Bagram as the American flag is draped. Our buddy's going out. Like, that's a whole fucking, that's another story. But yeah, dude, like, yeah. So it was just me and Thompson and Breeding, and fucking he got hit, and like once he was down, I had nobody to help me get the gun up. Couldn't even get the gun up because we're just, pinging. I don't know if you've ever heard rounds hit a mortar tube before, bro. Mm-hmm. Like fucking echoes, like just bang, bang, like just pinging every 5 seconds. I couldn't even stick my head out. Like, it was nuts. So tried to drag him in and couldn't really get him. He was like kind of caught up on a sandbag. So just kind of like a pretty shitty situation in there with me. And I just had to fight around him, like, kind of crawl around him, crawl over him and fight. And, yeah, it was about, 18 hours, I think, more or less, was like kind of the duration of this thing. Like,
well, that was the point I was going to make next for those who are listening. So when PFC Thompson gets killed, you're literally 2 minutes into the battle. Like, for all that you just described, spanned 120 seconds. And that kind of just gives, people listening who are not familiar with combat, how quickly or slowly time moves depending on your perspective. So, it's hard to encapsulate the next 18 hours for as long as this thing lasts. But, and I know Thompson was a really good friend of yours, and I do want to spend some time talking about him, but I kind of want to get through the rest of the day first.
Yeah.
How do you survive the next 10 to 15 minutes? What are you hearing from, your sergeants? What are you hearing from any of the leadership there? Or is this, when do you get a semblance of, hey, we can actually start to fight back?
I want to specify, I'm pretty sure my timeline and all this is going to be off because, again, combat is just kind of sporadic.
No, but I have the whole timeline here, so I'll help you out.
Okay, perfect. Because it was pretty early on. I'm pretty sure Thompson was the first one killed. We were the first one reported. Mm-hmm. And it was very soon. And I went through an entire belt, so 200 plus rounds, and grabbed another belt to put it on before my barrel was too hot, and then went in and started yelling at Breeding that Thompson was down. So, all this is going on, and I'm out there shooting and slinging, and it's chaos.
Do you know what you're shooting at this point, or are you just following muzzle flashes and trying to fire back?
No. I could see who I was shooting at this time. They were coming down. They were literally coming down. Like, so the switchbacks, like, it was kind of weird because I was more scared that I was going to get picked off from behind me. Like, when I was fighting and shooting at the enemy coming down and them around me, I was okay with that because I kind of was low, had some good coverage. But seeing Thompson get hit and knowing that I was getting shot at from every angle, that was like the difficult part. Is like I could only pick and choose my shots very, very quickly, or we had to wait for smoke to be thrown. We had to wait for an airstrike to come back out because it was just like very sporadic of when we could come back out and fight. But the initial wave, probably I'd say easily the first like 30 minutes, 20 minutes of the fight, like I was just slinging, like AT4s out, fucking rounds, low crawling we had speed balls around the pit. So I was like low crawling out, grab Thompson's 203 because he had a 203 on his shit. I had low crawl, get that shit off him, get his belt off of him. So like in the early parts of the fight, like, I wasn't thinking about anything like other than just fighting, really, because I was pissed off, man. I was really fucking pissed off. Like, it's you don't really think about it that I'm mad in that moment, but I know how I get, and I know my only emotion was to avenge, I guess. Like it's hard to explain. Like I didn't really think about the call, like what could happen to me. Like I knew the reality was there, but I honestly thought there was part of me that thought I was going to die. Like it was getting pretty bad in certain of those waves. Like, because there was again, the timeline I'm kind of jumping around, but there was like, we had an Apache, not shot down, but an Apache get hit. So we would have word that helicopters were inbound, and then helicopters aren't inbound anymore because something got hit. And then we had weather weather came in, like it was too rain, like the birds couldn't come in. We had soldiers bleeding out that couldn't get evac. So there was just shit, like there's other variables that were like just like weighing in that, you know, you don't really account for, but they're growing on you, because it's like, okay, even if I do get hit, if I do get shot, who the fuck's gonna
well, that's what I was going to ask you. Are you all by yourself at this point firing back?
Yeah. Well, in the pit, I had Breeding up there, but Breeding was on the radio because, you know, he's an E7, and like, you know, he was in there going back and forth, and then we lost comms. And then once we lost comms, there was probably like 3 or 4 hours of the fight where we were hiding, essentially, like, because there was a part where they were in our fucking wire, dude.
Well, like, that's where I was going next, because about 25, 30 minutes into this, you know, the enemy penetrates the compound.
Yeah. No, they were like, I had a Mark 19 ammo. You're familiar with a Mark 19 ammo can. They're massive. Mm-hmm. I had a Mark 19 ammo can full of hand grenades. Like, it was really weird. I probably still do. I just don't have any hand grenades. I had this weird obsession with hand grenades when I was in Afghanistan. Like, every time I'd refit on ammo, we had this huge ammo point and nobody would get hand grenades. And so I would come back up to the mortar pit with literally 6 hand grenades, like 3 in each cargo pocket. And I'd come up and I'd write, like, you know, fuck you on them, and, you know, just draw on them. And I had them all around the spot. I was like, because I would joke. I'd be like, you know, we're fucking out here with claymores and nobody's going to fucking direct us. I mean, we're going to come down throwing hand grenades. And sure as shit, I had a whole fucking bucket of hand grenades there. So I was throwing hand grenades. I probably threw about 25 to 30 hand grenades all around. But wow. I could hear them laughing, parading, like chanting, like just yelling. And
the enemy you're talking about.
Oh yeah, 100%. Because there's a little village called Armul, Armul, something like that, where my mortar pit was. The river touched on it, and then right on the other side of the river was Armul, and I could see into the mud huts and villages where we were getting shot back out at. Like, that's so. Once things like started kicking off, like where the village, that Armul village, is where they kind of like assembled, or kind of like they kicked everybody out. Apparently, they like came in the night before and they're like, get out or you're dying. And so everybody was evacuated out of this little city, and the Taliban waited there all night till the morning hit, and then they hit us, and they were right there. So when they breached the front wire, they were attacking us from the front gate. More to put it vividly, like where they were coming at us from was the front gate. So when all this is happening and it hit off, like, I mean, yeah, we had ANA I had ANA running the other way. Like, bro, there's ANA running away. Like, there's just shit, people coming in the gate that look like ANA. Like, it was mad, bro. Like, in this how easy they breached our Constantine wire. They would just throw a blanket over it. They had, I mean, that's as simple as as that sounds. You have this massive ball of Constantine wire around your thing, and they just put a blanket over it and roll right over it.
Really?
That's all. That's it. Like, we had this, you know, elaborate defense scheme, and they just came with a blanket, and they would throw blankets on it, and they'd roll right over it, just come right into the wire. So, like, it was just like this. It was, yeah. And it was very early on in the fight. I'd probably say within the first hour or two, they were already in the wire. They had breached it, and we didn't know who was who. So, oh yeah, that's the point I was going to say. Like, so I couldn't move Thompson's body. I tried a few times, and then I couldn't, you know, rigor mortis sets in, and just, it is what it is. I couldn't get his body out. But when we were hiding, after like few of the lulls, when we were hiding, and we could hear fucking footsteps and all that shit around us, I'm very convinced that a lot of reason why they didn't come in to check our hooch and like to come clear that shit or throw grenades in there or whatever the fuck is because they saw his body. And I genuinely think, like, I genuinely tell myself, like, Thompson's corpse probably saved my life in another way. Like, I truly believe that. Like, it was like, I felt like the enemy was probably like, okay, we've conquered this, keep going. And like, they ran past us. So when later on in the fight, once we started like getting comms and pushing back, and even I talked to, when we were back at Boston, we talked to some of like the helicopter Apache pilots and all those things. And I remember seeing a map of Keating and like in the talk room, and having all the locations the U.S. troops accounted for, and then the red was enemy. And you could see the mortar pit on the furthest northeast part of the COP, in the bottom part where everybody else was, and there was a figure 8 around the mortar pit and the cop of enemy. So it was like I knew I was isolated. I thought everybody was dead. I didn't know, we had no comms, nobody was fighting back. We didn't have fixed wings. No, we didn't know where anybody's at. Thompson was dead. You know, I had no idea. To my recollection, I thought Mace was dead because he was on the 50 cal below me. And in the morning, him and Larson switched out, and I didn't know. When I was in the computer, they had switched. So when I came running back, I thought Mace was still on it. I saw that Humvee get hit with an RPG, get fucked up. So I was like, he's dead. Nobody's shooting out of that truck. So I thought I was alone for a little bit, me and Breeding, and that's why we hid for a while, because when nobody was shooting, we were hiding and packing our bags like with as much ammo as we could. We had one MRE apiece, and we were going to wait for nightfall, and we were going to jump in the river and float down. I think it was like probably 6 Ks to the next base, something like that. And we were just going to take our chances in the river and try to swim it out and just wait for nightfall, put our nods on, and try to float down the next base. That was our plan. We thought everybody was dead. Like very, 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 very young. Like I remember me and him whispering as we're like literally have a map out. Like, okay, all right, we're here. We can get in the river here, take this down. I forget the name of that base. It started with an A. Anyway, yeah, that was our plan. That was our plan, because until comms were established and things kind of kicked back up and all this shit was happening, you know, because one of the ICOM or Gallegos's ICOM was taken in hot mic, so we had no internal communication for a little bit. So there was just a lot of stuff that made the entire day just fragmented beyond belief, and nobody really knew where anybody was,
right?
Until we established comms. So go ahead.
When you were there, you and that Sergeant First Class were there, and you guys were all alone. I just forgive the nature of this, but you know, I go back to that Forrest Gump quote when he's like, "As soon as I was all alone, I knew that was a bad thing." When you two were sitting there by yourself, like, what level of fear is there that, hey, it's just the two of us left, everybody else is gone? Like, what, you know?
Man,
are you contemplating like your survivability at this point?
Of course. Like, I mean, my best friend is literally dead outside of the footsteps where I slept. Like, I was contemplating a lot. Like, yeah, I mean, no, you're alone, but it's also weird too, right? Like, you're alone, but I had the means to survive in a way. Like, I knew I was going to shoot it out one way or another. Like, I didn't, like, even though I was in my hooch, if somebody came around that corner, and I mean, we were all ears at all times. They were sitting there whispering, and he was at one door and I was at the other door, and we could see each other. Like, our room. I'll explain it to you. So it's no bigger than 10 feet by 10 feet. I'm 5'8", and I could stand on the tippy toes and touch the ceiling. So it's very, very close quarters, but we had a side door on one side because it was built into a mountain. So one side that just came out these steps, and then another side. But again, the room's 10 by 10, so I could see through the room. And he was at one door and I was on the other door, and we're sitting there whispering and just listening. And so anything that came around the corner, we were waxing. There wasn't anything friendly to us. Like, we were gonna shoot it out, and each of us had, you know, enough ammo. You know, as long as we could support each other, we were gonna give it a mad fight. If anybody came down in there, it would be a bloodbath one way or the other. So that was kind of like pushed out. Like, we're going to sling this thing out. We're going to shoot it out. But then it was just the setting of like, I don't know where anybody else is at, right? Like, I don't know what's going on. Like, how am I going to, like, just like other factors and variables of like, am I going to get fucking kidnapped? Like, am I going to have to kill myself? Like, there's shit that I remember thinking that shit. Like, I'm not going to let him take me. I'm going to fucking kill myself. Like, just dumb shit, man. Like, that you're just kind of like going in and it's, yeah. And I remember like when it was really setting in, like, it's such a weird moment to remember this, but Breeding's like, I got a shit. I'm like, what? She's like, I got a shit. I'm just sitting there like, now? You got to take a shit now? Like, I didn't say that, but I'm like, you know, it's like this moment of like, we're still human. Like, we had a old mop bucket for whatever reason, like, you know, those yellow mop buckets. Mm-hmm. Like, we didn't mop anything, but it was just in there, never used for anything. And I have this vision of like, you know, my M4, you know, shotgun next to me, pistol, M4, got grenades laid out, and Breeding's behind me, just taking the most smelliest shit of my life I've ever had to endure. Like, I was like, what the, like, it was wild, man. Like, yeah, no, it was scary at the same time. Like, you know, I just remember like just being scared. I was scared and irritated and just on edge. I remember you were talking about the 18 to 24 duration and how, we briefly went on, like, depending on how fast or slow that goes for you. I didn't sleep for maybe 96 hours, and we didn't even leave Keating. So even it was burnt to the ground, overrun, etc. 10th Mountain ends up getting in at like midnight that night or later on that day. And I still was on Keating for another 3 days before I left the base. And I did not sleep a single wink the entire time I was there. Like, 10th Mountain took over all responsibilities. Like, they're like, I was there. They're like, nah, get rest, like this, that, like, getting patched up, all that shit. I did not sleep. And I did not know if I was still hearing bombs go off from just in my head or those are actually gun runs going on, like, for 3 days. Like, for 3 days, I was wired. I don't know if I blinked. Like, I was just wired on, I guess,
adrenaline. Yeah.
Pure adrenaline. I mean, yeah, like, I did not sleep. Like, and that's why I've told people that, I'm like, you shit. Oh, is that adrenaline or something? Like, shit, I'll tell you an adrenaline rush one of these days. But, like, yeah, no, I just remember, like, just laying there and the A-10s were just doing gun runs all night, hellfires all night. And I just could not sleep. I was just like, I didn't know. And that went on for almost 3 days. I remember when I got back to Bostic and I ended up getting the fragment taken out of my shoulder and all this shit. I'd broken a pinky, like some just shit that you didn't even realize you had done until you get back. And they told me, they're like, you should take this time to get your wisdom tooth pulled. And I'm like, what? They're like, just trust us. You need to get it taken out, get your wisdom teeth pulled out. It's going to give you an extra 3 weeks. So I got my wisdom tooth yanked in that downtime. So they gave me an extra month. So I had a month of, like, when I got off the mountain, it took me about a month to, like, probably feel right to return to duty. Like, I was pretty exhausted from everything. So it was a lot. It was a lot, man.
Yeah.
It was a lot.
While you're there and the fight is going on, when you guys finally are able to come out of your spot in hiding and re-engage, are you getting a sense of how many other guys are wounded and killed at this point?
Yes, because once comms were restored, that's when you started kind of getting the tidbits of where everybody was at. You heard Romeshay saying that he was at, this location, LRAS. Then you start hearing that LRAS 2 still has people alive in it, and that's even a bigger thing. That's like a big thing for me, is like LRAS 2 was kind of close to me, and there's a lot of nights I've thought, like, man, could I have gone down there and helped them or gave them more ammo or just shit like that. That's the shit that really eats at me, is like, maybe I could have done more to save somebody's life there or that, but like in the moment of it, like, once everything was starting to collectively piece back together and like your gel and everybody, like, we're here, we're there. You start figuring out, like, okay, this is bad, right? You're hearing all the KIAs, you're hearing all the woundeds, you're hearing another person come in, like, yeah, it's just, it just kind of like, it's just this, I don't know, it's surreal, bro. It's like even weird talking about it, like, kind of just going back there and hearing all the go back and forth, and even hearing like the gun runs and the nets, like, the people talking from Bagram, like, trying to get the situation under control. I'm just like, we're getting absolutely fucked out here, dude. Like, we are getting hammered. And you're just doing all you can to survive and fight. But, definitely hearing that Americans are alive and people are still fighting is definitely a good feeling, especially when you're whispering to a guy taking a shit behind you, contemplating jumping in a river and hiding in dark. Like, to know Americans are still on the base and you guys are still in the fight was definitely, it was encouraging. And then the gun runs started coming in, the bombs, dude. I remember that they would give us a drop time. The pilots would just say, they'd say bombs away, 10 seconds of counting, 9, 8. You're just sitting there and they're dropping these things. I think the Air Force told us that they don't practice anything. 600 meters, I think, is considered danger close for a bomb, like a 2,000-pound bomb or some shit like that. That's danger close. They don't even practice anything within a click, more or less, We were getting 2,000-pound bombs dropped within a football field of us.
Oh God,
that shit, bro. Look, I've been blown up. I have been shot at. I have fucking been shot. I have been some shit. I have never felt more vulnerable and like just itty bitty than having bombs dropped around you. Like knowing they weren't gonna land on me, or knowing they weren't supposed to land on me, but being that close. Like, I mean, I felt like just in my full battle rattle, I could feel my ribs and just organs just bouncing. Just the doors would like blast open on the little hooch we were staying in, and just like me and Braden would be holding on to each other, just like you see the atomic bomb, like 1950s thing where the house just blows away, like type shit. Like that's what I felt like I was going through, just like this force, and there was one after another after another after another after another. I mean, there was a lot of things that were shit, but to me, those bombs being dropped, bro, were rattling me. And like, you have 8 seconds to count down whether is this bomb going to be off by 50 yards or is it going to be on point? Like,
are you counting down to my death or someone else's?
Yeah, exactly. I'm counting down with this shit, and they would say, "God be with you," and bombs away, 10 seconds. I'd just be like sitting there, like, all right. Well, and you would hear them reiterate too, like, are you, like, yelling, "Are you sure there are no friendlies outside of the wire? Are you sure?" Yes, we're fucking sure. Drop. Like, yes, we're fucking sure there's no friendlies outside the wire. Drop them. It's like, all right, like, yeah, like, it was mad, dude. It was mad.
When you guys get control of the base back, and this happened sometime in the middle of the day, from a time standpoint.
Yeah.
After they had breached the wire, it didn't happen until about 10 or 11 o'clock. But, beyond that, you're still receiving fire from that small city called Lermal that you talked about. Mm-hmm. Obviously there's still mortars coming in from in the mountains. Do you get a sense that you guys have got control back, or you don't feel that until nightfall?
I personally didn't feel it probably till nightfall.
Okay.
I probably didn't feel it till nightfall. During the day, there were waves of it. But again, like, I think the biggest thing for me of knowing that we're in the control of the fight is that I'm getting fixed wings in here. I'm getting Apaches in here. But most importantly, I'm getting my casualties out.
Right.
And we could never get our casualties out. So that was always a lingering factor, even though we had control and we had comms restored and we knew we probably starting to swing the tide. In the back of my head, not predominantly, but at the time, it's like, you're hearing over the radio, like, who's A positive, like, we need blood for Mace, like this, that, and the other. It's just like, okay, even though I feel like we might be getting this back, we've got who knows how many dead Taliban in the wire. I mean, they're just literally, you're running over them, double tapping them, they're stepping over them and shit, like, everywhere. So you see where the fight essentially is in our favor to some degree. Everything's on fire. But for me, it was just like, it wasn't safe until I was out of there. Right. And when I knew we couldn't even get our boys out of there who had been injured, and people who had been injured that weren't like in dire need were taking care of themselves and staying there for the bird out the next day. Like, so it was just the scenario where it's like, even though I felt, yes, we had gained control. We were getting our casualties. We had found Hart. I mean, we had my buddy Hart. He was missing in action for, like, I don't fucking know how many hours. I mean, I'm just remember hearing on the radio, we have MIA. Do a fucking survey, and I'm not trying to boast in any regard, but there's not many people who are in today's service who've heard over radio, we have an MIA soldier missing in action. Like, that shit is just not said. And we had you're hearing over the radio, my buddy is missing in action. Like, he was last seen at this post, Taliban hit him, and they think they're dragging his body. Like, that fucks with you, bro. Like, that shit is nerve-wracking to hear that shit. Like, so as much as it was like restoring comms, it was like, it was also hearing news. It was also hearing shit news, that, like, the reality of what was really taking place. So there was a lot of still uncertainty where I didn't feel safe until I knew I was out of there.
Well, and Sergeant Hardy, you referenced, he was found by the QRF not until post 8:00 at night local time where you guys were.
Exactly.
So the QRF had to come in and find him. And when the QRF gets on ground, is there a sense of, when do you get that sense of relief? I should say, like, when do you get that sense of, I made it and I'm alive?
I think knowing that the QRF had just come down the switchbacks that I had seen easily, if I had to put just a figure of muzzle flashes at any given time, I probably saw probably 60 muzzle flashes, right? Like, and that's just me being like, from one length of a mountain switchback to another, you just see them sporadically everywhere, just like little fireworks, and I'm just like, so. And
Switchbacks was the name of the mountain area you were talking about, right? So it's the name you guys gave it?
Yeah, so a switchback essentially is like, so think of a mountain, but then like going up the mountain face, they cut, like they zigzag a path, like back and forth.
Right.
So that switchback was like the trail through the mountains to Fritchie. That's where we got it. That's one part of the side we got attacked from, that they were literally running down. Like they were running down the switchbacks. And I'm just sitting there like, what the, like, so once the QRF, I knew the QRF landed at Fritchie. We knew that the QRF was hiking down the switchback to come to us because it was too hot to come into Fritchie.
Mm-hmm.
In the back of my head, I was like, they are about to get fucked up. Like I feel so bad for these QRF guys. Cause in my mind, I was like, these dudes are about to go through some shit. They didn't. I think they found one guy who tried to who was like wounded or something. I think they may have killed one other dude, but no small arms were taken, nothing from the QRF. So when they arrived at our base from the same switchbacks that I was just being engaged from, then I was a little bit more confident. I was like, okay, if we just had reinforcements come through there, either a lot of them are dead or a lot of them have run. And like, but if they weren't fighting those guys coming in, then I'm pretty sure that they've left town for at least, the night. Right. And that was the other thing, is like, we had just been hit that day or that night or that day going into the night. We had no ROE the next day. We were sent up. We were strictly told, if anybody's trying to recover anybody, if anybody's doing anything, take them out. We had no, so I thought we were going to get hit the next day. Like I was saddled up and geared. Like I did not think the fight was over. Like I was like, this is unreal. Like we were going to get hit again, like mounting the fuck back up. So, when they got there and I knew they didn't take any action or engagement getting there, I felt confident that, okay, tonight isn't going to be any more. But I was very sure that we were going to get hit the next morning. Like, you know what I mean? Like come finish off. Cause our base was on fire. The whole thing was on fire.
Right.
Like every sleeping quarter, the chow hall was burnt to the ground. The aid station was, I don't know. They had to cut down a tree to save the aid station with a chainsaw in the middle of the fucking fight. Like dumb, bro, crazy shit.
Yeah, to say the least.
Crazy shit.
One more on this whole battle, because there are other things I want to discuss with you. But when do you start to run down the list of names? Thompson, Scusa, Gallegos, Martin, Kirk, Hart, Mace. I mean, when you start to hear all those names and you get accountability of what has happened to everybody, emotionally, what does that do to you?
It's hard. I don't know if I remember. I mean, I remember being told, because we didn't have any body bags. We didn't have enough body bags. So I used my poncho in a hefty bag. I had to put Thompson's head essentially in a 33-gallon hefty bag and my poncho just to keep it. So I was putting him on the stretcher, up there, putting him on this shit, fucking pissed off, and then my other buddy Raz comes up and he helps me carry the body down, and that's when I see all the other bags and all the other shit, and I'm just talking to him who is it? And he starts telling me, he's like, Kirk, Scusa, Griffin, he's just listing them, and I'm just like, it's just it's hitting you. It's like, fuck, man, and then the shitty part was, though, is me and Mace were both from Virginia. We're literally the same age. I was born in January, he was born in April. Me and him we were tight. He was my boy, and he got out. Like we thought he got out on the bird. Like we thought he was going to live. And then Raz, the same buddy that helped me take Thompson down, he came back up, and he probably, I don't know what time it was, maybe like, early morning, 1 a.m. It was still dark out. I just remember him telling me, he's like, hey man, Thompson didn't make it. That shit fucked
You mean
me.
Mace didn't make it?
Or Mace didn't make it. And that really fucked me. That hurt me hard. Because I felt like we had done so much to get him out of there. Like, that, and when he didn't make it, that was gut wrenching. Like, a lot of the other guys, Thompson included, died very fast. Right? Like, it's unfortunate, but the suffering was kind of taken out of it. To be as much of a fighter and like loved by everybody as he was, and like knowing his spirit, like, and then just to not have made it through all that shit all day long, man, fuck, that was hard to hear. That was a difficult one.
And just for context for people listening, at least according to the reports, Mace was injured by an RPG at 6:30 in the morning, and he wasn't pronounced dead until 11:30 that night. When he made it back to Fob Bostic, which again, I mean, that's a better part of 18 hours that he was, trying to fight for his life. And other people have echoed that same sentiment about Mace. For whatever reason, he was one of the ones that stuck with people because there was such that effort. And as you said, I think there's a certain sort of, at least when you talk about guys getting killed quickly in combat, it's transactional, if that's the best way to describe it, right? It happened, it's over, it's done, there's nothing we can do. But the ones you can save that don't get saved are the ones that really, get the emotion involved with everything.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, they've all definitely taken emotional toll, and there's never a pleasant one by any means. But you're right. It's it is kind of it's a suffering, right? It's doing all you can, knowing you went through all that, just beat the odds, really. Like, I mean, we're outnumbered like 3-1, some 4 to some crazy shit, like. And you just do all you can, even with Cordova, bro. Like me and Cordova, me and Cordova were both replacement soldiers to Iraq. So we went through that 3-week process and deployed to Rustamaya together. He became the PL of the unit, but we were just buddies. And then just by chance, when we got to Afghanistan, Cordova was attached to my unit to come to Keating. So I was with the doctor that I would have put my life on. We mountain bike, like, I felt very confident in the team around us and knew that if it was me or Mace on that table, they're going to do everything they could to save my life and to get things done. And knowing what Cordova did in terms of like blood transfusions, like straight to soldier, like, what they did to save his life for as long as they did is pretty miraculous for me. But it's just like, at the same time, it's just gut wrenching to know you did all that, and it's like, it's just, it hurts. So, but it's war. Hey.
No, I mean, sometimes that's all you can chalk it up to. I do want to talk about Thompson because you guys had a very unique relationship, and a promise you had made to him sort of led you to the next phase of your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, we would, I think in the lulls and uncertainties of the fights, or not the uncertainties, but the lulls and like just the downtime is when for me, it was when I would really reflect on things I missed or what I wanted to do. And we would just always talk about what we were going to do when we got out. Like, he didn't want to stay in anymore. He wanted to go back to Reno, Nevada, and, start a new life. And I told him, I was like, look, man, I miss football. I would love to, use my GI Bill and go to school and try to play college football. And we would joke about it. Like, kind of, it's like one of those things you just like put out an idea of what you want to do and just see if your friends support you or talk shit about it. And Thompson was just always like, bro, that'd be so cool. Like, it'd be so cool. And we had a PS, like a PlayStation 1 or some old PlayStation up there in our hooch. And we would play NCAA, whatever, 2003, whatever was left there, from the units way before us, and we'd just sit in there and play college football. And I'd talk, just tell him, I want to try to play football again. And yeah, I promised him, and we would talk about it. He's like, man, promise me. And that's what he'd always say, like, promise me. And he'd say something, all right, promise me. And I'm just bullshitting. And then, but if I said I promised him, it was like something I felt like I was pretty serious about. And then he was killed, like probably a few weeks later, 2 weeks later, something like that. So when I got out, like, it wasn't like, okay, now I got to go live out this promise. Like, I had some pretty down time, like about a down 6 months, like very, 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 not suicidal by nature, but just questioning. Like, one of my good friends, Faulkner, had just killed himself. Like, as soon as I got out of the Army, like 2 weeks later, I wrote on his Facebook wall, like, hey, I'm going to be in North Carolina. Like, hit me up. And then 2 minutes later, my phone rings, Sergeant Hill. And he's talking. He's like, hey, man, how you doing? And I'm like, what's up, Sergeant, man? I just try to hit up Faulkner. Crazy you're calling me. He's like, yeah, man, I just saw that, saw that on his Facebook page, man. I'm sorry nobody told you, man, but Faulkner took his life, brother. And that hurt me too. Like, so I had this period of like adjusting to literally going back to my high school room and like laying down in my bed in high school and just being like, this is not the same. Like, I am not the same person I was. Like, this shit is not real. Like, I am not who I was when I slept here last, So I had like this emotional toll on me before I could register for school and use my GI Bill, because I got out October and I had to wait till January. So all of October, November, December, 3 months, man, of like, people calling me a hero and all this shit. And I'm just like, bro, I'm about to blow my brains out. If, like, you know what I mean? Like, not to speak, not to speak candidly on it, but just from a soldier's point of view that had been there, like that's what I was struggling with. Like, I was struggling with that shit. I had to get a dog. Like, I tell people my dog, I gave her up for adoption, went to school, but that dog saved my life. Like, having an animal that was just always excited to see me, that didn't care how bad my day was. It's like, you either take me out to pee or I'm gonna pee in the house. Just having like this loving responsibility really, really, really saved me, really took me out of a low place and kind of gave me some building blocks back. And that journey led to, you know what, you kill yourself, then you're letting Thompson down, or you're letting all these other friends down. Like, they would give anything they would to be here, to see their family, to, struggle, like, we always want the best in life, but, some people would give anything to fucking struggle to be, to see a loved one again. And yeah, I just kind of took it upon myself to change my attitude and look at it differently, in a perspective and optic of how I go about my life. It's like, what I do, what I set out to do, the effort I make, it's not just for me or on behalf of me. Like, there's more to it. There's a obligation to continue the mission and fight and go on and do what you say, like, i.e. college football, because you got buddies that died for that shit, right? Like, if we buy into the American dream, or the thank you for your sacrifice and service for my freedoms. Well, that's what they did. And I'm not gonna have them have died in vain, just because, whatever my issues might be. So, I kind of took that promise and really made it a catalyst and form of motivation for me to go just check off boxes, right? And kind of make sure that when the story is told, I'm not the, oh man, that Rodriguez, yeah, he was a good, yeah, it sucks, Rodriguez killed himself too, like, to me, that's kind of letdown. That's the letdown of it. And, so that's where the promise ultimately came in, and that was how that was established, and ultimately led to me playing at Clemson and briefly playing in the NFL, and kind of like, being the first ever Purple Heart recipient to have an NCAA touchdown. And, I went on to do some cool stuff, and, I had to kind of talk myself through some low places and remember promises and remember friends that weren't here to celebrate it or cheer me on, which was another hard thing to do. But, you got to live in representation and know that, they'll probably never see what you do, maybe they're looking down on me. I don't know, but I do it for them in a certain way, and that was kind of like the promise and all that stuff that was attributed to kind of like my push and perseverance and to getting to where I was and where I'm at. But ultimately, just you lose friends early on. The older you get, the more difficult it is to comprehend what they didn't get to experience in life. Like that's sad to me. Like yeah, I've got a lot of smiles on my face over the years, but it hurts more to know like what they didn't get to see or what they didn't get to experience. So that's kind of where I feel what I've been doing, or kind of the influence or motivation I have is because of that. Like that's what I tell myself, So
What do you think that Thompson would have said to you, seeing you put on that Clemson football uniform?
He would have laughed, man. He would have just laughed and probably sparked a cigarette. No, I know. I think he would have just been proud, man. Like it's funny because you know how the Army is. Everybody gives each other shit. So it's hard to sit here and say that I would have a fan base of supportive guys when I know they would just tell me how small I was, and they would find a way to do what soldiers do. So, but ultimately, I know that I think, kind of thinking on it, he was just the kind of guy that just did what made him happy and just enjoyed other people doing what made them happy. So, he wasn't rich or come from anything of like elaborate background. So just to do what you say and do what you love would have been fine for him. Like, so knowing that I put that jersey on, I wasn't a Clemson fan. I'm a diehard now, but I was just trying to fulfill a promise. So I could have put on any jersey. I know he would have been proud of me. But once I put it on and kind of did it, like I think you think about it now, I think he'd for sure smile. Like, I would say, I told you, I promised you. That's what I would say.
Well,
then,
so the promise to him was college football. Who was the promise for the NFL?
That was myself, really. Like, cause it's twofold. Like the promise to him wasn't just out of the blue. It wasn't just like, I grew up an athlete. Like, I had a Division II scholarship. Like I was a AAU state championship in basketball. It was like, I would have played varsity football all 4 years, but my freshman year was cut short because of DC Sniper. Sophomore year, made varsity. Junior year, parents went through a separation, so I missed the camp. My coach was kind of a dick back. We're cool now, but didn't let me play. He was going to let me play, but he demoted me back down to JV. I was coming in as a junior, and I'd already played varsity as a sophomore. And he was like, "You missed camp." I was like, "Yo, my parents are going through separation. They sent me down to live in Florida." He's like, "Well, you can play on JV and work your way back up." And I was like, "Fuck you!" And I just didn't play. So my junior year, I didn't play. And my senior year, I came back and played. And I played everything: quarterback, backup, free safety. I played it all. I played everywhere. I was an athlete. So when I got to the Army, just a few weeks before, a few months before, I was crying in the locker room over my last high school game. I'm not. This is it. My playoffs are over. Didn't win states, etc. So you have that lingering effect of everything you've always wanted to do and what you've excelled at, and knowing that you're going to get your GI Bill, or me knowing I was going to have my GI Bill coming out of the Army, like it was just sitting there ripe. Like all I could think about was fucking playing football again, or using my GI Bill to go to a university and potentially walk on or do something like that. Like I didn't know the process, but I knew I still had my athletic ability and love for the game. So just kind of reflecting on the mountaintops of what you want to do and realizing what you had and what opportunities you wish you could have taken over, or what girls you could have taken out on dates. Like, so was the football of like, man, like I'm thinking about this all the time. Like maybe I should just try it. And so, you kind of bring it up and start conversation. And Thompson's a dude that's just like super encouraging, no matter how wild the fantasy or thing would be like, oh man, that'd be cool, man, do it. Yeah, hell yeah, man, hell yeah. Just one of those guys that just, it was never too big or didn't seem unfathomable. Like he was just the guy to put a smile on your face. So like, it was just one of those things. It was just he was the right guy to be there to kind of make sure that seed was sown, not planted but sown. So yeah, that's kind of how it folded. And yeah, so it was always love for me to want to play, and he pushed it. And then once I got to Clemson and I got playing time and saw the system and realized there was NFL scouts literally every single day at practice. I had NFL scouts. They would watch all our film, practice film, game film. So I knew, I was like, okay, I can make a statement in practices. I don't have to be a star. Like, they're looking for like, these scouts get paid to scout talent coming into the NFL. Like, if they find somebody, they discover somebody that they don't have to draft and can get cheap as a free agent and save the organization, they get bonuses. So it's a system in play for these guys to come scout the potential on every single campus. And I knew that. And so I would bust my ass in practice. I would bust my ass on special teams everywhere and just talk to the scout, introduce myself. So after my 3 years, I played in 37 consecutive games. I had I think 11 catches, nothing significant at all. But, I had my stats. I had touchdown. I was second leading punt returner at Clemson for the 3 years I was there. Played behind prolific ass athletes like DeAndre Hopkins, Sammy Watkins, Deshaun Watson was my teammate my senior year. Played with some studs. So we had a lot of recognition going into it. And just you know what? I'm going to go to my pro day. And I've always wanted to play in the NFL. As a kid, I would jump on the couch get over my dad for the game-winning touchdowns, type thing. And so once I had accomplished college and was really getting a taste and understanding of this is something I could do, I told my receivers coach that I was going to do my pro day, and he laughed at me. He laughed at me, bro. I was like, yeah, I got invited to a senior game, I guess all the seniors get invited to Reese's Bowl or Mobile, Alabama, where all the scouts. I got one invite to the Medal of Honor Bowl in Charleston, South Carolina, which is a military, obviously Medal of Honor Bowl, but they invited me because of my service and background. So I literally had one invite to an NFL debut, and I took it, and it was on the same night as our senior night for the thing. And my coach was like, well, you can't go to that because I was like, Coach, you must not understand me. I'm going to go play in the NFL. I don't care if you laugh at me or we have a senior night. I'm getting on that plane and I'm going to go play in front of all 32 NFL scouts because this might be the only opportunity I get. And so I went for it, took it. The Washington football team, as they are called, and the Rams contacted me. And the Rams offered me a 2-day trial period. So I flew out. They flew me out. And on the second day, I had a really good showing. Had a good catch against Janoris Jenkins, he's a pretty good cornerback in the NFL. And they signed me as a punt returner to back up Tavon Austin. So I signed with the Rams, played all 4 preseason games, and in the 4th preseason game, I suffered a concussion against Kansas City on a kickoff return. And next thing I remember is Coach Fisher looking down at me, kind of went to the sideline, and in that moment, I kind of knew that was probably going to be my last play. Even though I wanted more, the hit really took a toll on me. I never recovered from it competitively as you should. There's an edge that comes with being that high, I believe, as an athlete. You have to keep the story that you are invincible and you are the best to compete. If there's any slither of doubt or uncertainty, for me, I feel that's a weakness. And I doubted whether I wanted to get hit again, right? Not that I was scared to get hit, but I did not remember anything. I failed this concussion test going into it. I've been blown up several times. I think I had 7 IED type shit. I'd been rattled before. So just all this, I lost the love for it. I lost the love to compete in that nature. I just remember telling myself, okay, I'm going to get healthy and then come back and maybe blow a knee out. And just anything of that realm of doubt or uncertainty, you can't have that. You can't. It's got to be, for me at least, it's I'm going to sell out on this. I belong here. I'm supposed to be here. I've done everything I can to be here. I'm going to make my way. And after that hit, it was just nah, I don't think this is what I want anymore. So that was the stint of my football days going into 2016. And so I left combat, 27 months of combat, then played 3 years at Clemson and briefly for the Rams. I was signed with the Rams before I was they don't call it cut. They call it getting waived when you're injured. So
right, you have injury settlement, and they send you on your way.
Exactly.
Semantics, right? Either way, you're not in the NFL anymore.
Right. Yeah.
So you wrote the book. Again, it was called Rise: A Soldier, a Dream, and a Promise Kept. What did you want to get out of it? What did you hope to tell people?
Man, it's kind of like something that it really came out of nowhere. So to answer your question, what did I didn't want to write it. I didn't. I was actually apprehensive at first. I was approached by it. I was still in school. I was still in college. The NCAA actually ended up granting me access to have representation while I was an NCAA athlete. I was, to my knowledge, the only or first ever NCAA athlete playing with representation and being paid as an athlete to like do other shit. I was speaking. I would fly out on a Tuesday, speak at Framingham State University or Central Michigan, fly back, and then play in that Saturday game. So I had a very unique college experience. And ESPN did 2 Tom Rinaldi pieces on me, like game day pieces. And Tom Rinaldi, if you're familiar, he just always does sentimental, makes everybody cry pretty much. And so 2 of those military appreciation specifically segments were dedicated to me. So I had, once those went in the college football world in the South or just across the country, US, I started getting a lot of recognition in terms of just like, opportunities, interviews. USAA flew in. I was the USA Person of the Year. I got like, any military award that I didn't even know existed outside of the military for college athletics. I was like immediately put in. I got to go to the Orange Bowl because I was Orange Bowl military, just random shit, right? So like once that Tom Rinaldi piece hit, that's when the book opportunity came. I had a really good friend who was Dan Rather, had came to my high school and did this piece on me, Dan Rather Reports, and he was the whatever of Dan Rather's thing. He's like, hey man, this guy named Joe Layden, he's done Kobe Bryant's autobiography, he's done Sal Guntez, who's a Medal of Honor recipient, he's also done Dwayne The Rock Johnson. He's like, he's really keen on your story. I think he'd be a really good fit for you. He's done over 30 New York Times best-selling books. He's like, this is something you want to do. And I was like, not interested. And word started circulating. He had contacted my mom. My mom had talked to another lady, Mace's mom. And I remember kind of talking to Rich and Vanessa. Well, Larry's his dad, but Rich is his stepdad. And I was just talking to them at his annual golf tournament kind of thing. And told him what was going on. And she looked at me and she said, Daniel, if you don't tell your story, I will be mad at you. She's like, there are people out there who need to hear this, what you're doing, your friends, etc. And then it was just like this wave of like, okay, if this woman, my friend's mom is telling me to do this shit, I'm going to do this shit. And so, yeah, I went back to him. I was like, listen, 2 things are going to happen. This isn't going to be, Remember the Titans Disney. Like this, I'm going to write this raw and we're going to not sugarcoat this. I was like, because I got buddies I served with that if any of this is inaccurate, they're not going to let me live it down and they're never going to talk to me. So I was like, don't expect this to be a PG-13 book and don't expect this to be sugarcoated by any means. And Joe and they were okay with it. They said, perfect. And I was like, all right, let's do it. So, that's how the book came about. So my junior year, going to my senior year of school, finished it, was published my senior year. And that kind of amplified a speaking career coming out of college. So I was on the speaking circuit. The book hit bestsellers list right out of the gate. So that was really cool to have that. And then even though I tried for the NFL and didn't work out, I was still speaking full time. So that was kind of like my segue of like leaving football, turning the chapter. And I focused on speaking and working on a second book and doing some other stuff. And the team moved to LA. So I was in California for like the last 4.5 years. So just kind of, just how life goes, right? You kind of, things happen, things end, and you just reestablish, relocate, and kind of go with it. So it was a great ride. And, I felt like I got a lot out of football. And a lot out of my education and the GI Bill and all those other things that came with it. So pretty unique time in my life.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a heck of a ride, all things considered, filled with highs and lows. And glad you're back on the high part of it. Obviously, I wonder now that you're a decade removed from the Battle of Kamdesh, what still stays with you the most?
Man. That's hard. I think it just have to be the relationships, right? Like, I could take a lot of things away, but ultimately it's the people I still care about, the people that fought with me that day. Me and Romache are still extremely close. Me and Larson are still extremely close. Like, we go to Mesa's golf tournament. Well, this year it wasn't, but we go to Mesa's golf tournament every year. And, I think just, having, yeah, it's the relationships, man. That's what I take away from everything. All my army days, all that stuff. The people I met, the people I'm still in contact with, like, the good and the bad. Like, I wouldn't have those buddies with me, and I wouldn't be here alive today if it wasn't for them. So, that's kind of what I've always taken out of it, is just the relationship and the guys I met and the different walks of life that you meet too. Like, you're exposed to a lot of stuff as an enlisted guy, and you see a lot of walks of life coming through those doors. So, it's grateful and appreciative that, people I probably would never had anything in common with, or probably never seen a day in their life, or meet, their folks or where they're from, or step planes on a Nebraska field and hunt with greyhounds. That would never exist unless I joined the Army and met those guys. So it's always the relationships is what I take away from it, the good and the bad, just the guys I was able to serve with and continue to be friends with.
Where are you with your PTSD? And again, for those who listen, who are not familiar with kind of the struggle that PTSD is, I mean, you learn to live with it. You don't ever actually kind of get over it, right? You just sort of manage it and day to day. And, the things that kept you up at night, those feelings, those fears, whatever they may be, where are you with all that?
It varies, because I've grown to be extremely transparent with it, because I used to kind of hide it and just I didn't enjoy talking about it. But now I'm kind of at the point where it's like, I don't think my post traumatic stress has ever been like a flashback, or like wake up screaming type things. It's more or less, I think it's the rabbit holes for me, like kind of getting caught up on, like I mentioned it earlier, like what I could have done or what I didn't do. I've had a few bad recalling dream, like a dream, like this weird ass dream where Thompson like shoots me in the face. Like, it's just weird. So I've had that several times where I've woken up to like the gunfire. Like used to have a dream where I would be in a Humvee and like I would look out the left window, and as soon as I looked to the left, it was just a flash, like just been blown up. So I would have like dreams or moments like that, and those kind of dwindled away. I was in a relationship for a little bit, and I think that helped. The girl I was with kind of helped me out a lot in that regard. She was there for a lot of it and kind of helped me through some stuff. So I think slowly and surely I was able to adjust. Believe it or not, being on the speaker circuit, and just telling the story, not over and over, but just like connecting with people and getting feedback from the audience, of being just so appreciative of my friends and getting to know that story. That was also comforting. Like, it kind of took me out of my shell of like, this forbidden fruit that I've been scared of. PTSD is what I'm talking about, or like, it's like when I share with people what it is that gives me the traumatic stress, it's like they're so appreciative of it, and almost being the beacon to them kind of took the pressure off my shoulders, if you will, in a way. It was like, I'm sharing this with more people so they can carry the weight in a weird way. So I've had like different outlets to kind of depressurize the post-traumatic stress that I have suffered with. But today, to answer your question, like where I'm at today, I'm pretty strong-minded. I feel pretty sturdy. I have my moments. I get caught up in things, but I try to stay grounded and just remember, the circumstances, perspective, and try not to get too caught up on things, or when I do get too serious on stuff, also just reflect back on what is serious. Who is really suffering, who really has the right to be complaining right now. And I think for me, a lot of stress and post-traumatic stress I brought upon myself by just dwelling on the negativity of it, and it's also good to reflect on the positiveness of it. And that's the relationships, the people I've helped out of it. What have I gone through and suffered that some other kid might not make this mistake?
Right.
How will that impact a future generation? And even on the war terms, I always get the people, oh, do you believe in it or this? And it's like, the fuck, I don't know. I was 18, I was doing this. Yes, I think there's necessary evils, but I also helped liberate a lot of kids from Taliban and some other shit over there. So I've done things where I feel justifiably and strong, and no matter the circumstances that I come across with future post-traumatic stress, because I just feel like I'm constantly building up a sturdy foundation of reinforcement and promises to myself and other people that support me that I'm not alone in it. Right.
Right.
And so that's kind of what I've taken to it is I'm not afraid to talk about it. Yeah, it is scary sometimes. Yeah, even with all this shit going on in 2020, this world and, protests and all this shit, like, there's a anxiety, and I feel, and probably a lot of soldiers who feel like they're still on a battlefield and they're coming home or they're in this country, and there's chaos in the street sometimes. So I think in that form I've had some, not relapses, but certain moments of like, okay, keep calm, like, you're not at war, like shit like that, so there's definitely moments in my own life I have to keep that barometer and find true north and just remember where I'm at, who I am, what I've gone through, and yes, know that like you said, it's never going to leave you. It's just, how do you adjust that volume level today? How do you kind of set it amongst yourself so you can learn from it and not go down that road again, or what I mean? So
Right.
That's kind of where I'm at, if that answers that.
No, it does. I ask this question a lot because I just think it provides a lot of perspective. But if Daniel Rodriguez now was to have a conversation with the young man 4 days after the death of his father, what would he tell him?
Don't go infantry. No. Oh man, that's tough. That's tough.
Let's say the Daniel Rodriguez 4 days after his father passed away that already signed his contract.
Man, I don't know, man. I don't know what I would tell myself. I guess just if I knew, if hypothetically, if I go through the same thing I go through and I know that on the outcome, and I'm going back telling myself right now, just I would just tell myself, just stay positive, right? Like stay positive, just keep your head down and fight, just do your job. Like I don't know, it's hard for me to answer that question, because I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know what I could go back and tell myself right now that would give me a solace or a justification of what I went through, because I don't think there really is. You use the word transactional. I don't really feel that part of me, of my military experience. It's just like I was just doing my job. Like I enlisted, I went in, put in some shit circumstances, but ultimately I volunteered in a time of war, right? So like it's I think it's selfish of me to kind of have the woe is me, but on that same thing, if I had to tell myself, like, just, hey, that's what you signed up for, man, do your job, just go do it, just go, I don't know, I it's kind of anticlimactic, but I really don't know what I would tell myself, because it's hard to tell yourself anything 4 days after your father dies. Like, I was trying, I don't know what I was thinking. Like I was thinking, man, I gotta get a job, and I'm the man of the house now. Like just all this stuff is going through my head. So to like hone in on what it was exactly, man, I don't know. I truthfully, bro, I would tell myself, don't go infantry. That as jokingly enough as I said that, I probably would stay true to my dad's wisdom, and probably gotten right. Because he would tell me, he was like, I was infantry. He's like, go be something. He's like, once you get out of the military, use your GI Bill, get a trade that you can use for the rest of your life. And that's what he would tell me. He's like, use it as a building block. Use it as a building block. And
you certainly did.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Other vets have had an opportunity like this, and I'm just curious how you would feel about it, provided it could be a safe trip. Would you ever want to take a trip back to COP Keating and just stand on that ground again? Do you think it would provide you with any closure?
Yeah, I think I would. I don't know if it would bring closure, but maybe. Because I've thought about that, man. I used to think about that in Baghdad. like, as much as it was born, torn, and riddled, like it was a beautiful country.
I'd
Like,
love to go back. I agree 100%.
yeah,
I
like
would,
yeah, I
I
think I
would
would.
absolutely, I would love to go back to a couple of spots, including the one where we were ambushed on. I'd love to just go back to certain things to sort of relive some of those memories and see what comes out of it. I think that there's catharsis in that for some reason.
No, I don't. So this is wild, but kind of on the same topic. Have you seen the Outpost, the movie The Outpost?
I have decided to read the book first before the movie because I am a guy who wants the full picture instead of the Hollywood version of it.
That's fair. I respect that. So I actually play myself in the movie. I'm in the movie, and I had to fly out to Bulgaria to film it. That was crazy, bro. They was like to a T of what the base was. They rebuilt the entire. Yes, dude. So I flew in on set. I was like, what the fuck? Like it was, they had over, I looked in the green room. They had over like 2,000 pictures collected from my unit, the unit before me, from 2004 when the base opened. They had when Jake was doing his book, they went through all those and got all these pictures and reconstructed it. Even my pictures. They reconstructed the mortar pit exactly, the hooches, the beds, everything, the chow hall, everything. So I was just like, I walked in and it was daunting. I was like, what have I done? Like, this is not good. So to kind of go back to like this, the hypothetical of us going back, when I left that set after filming it, I did feel a sense of therapeutic relief because I felt like, okay, this film is going to be an adaptation, but now I don't really have to talk about it. Like, it's gonna be out there for people. People have always asked me, like, what is it like? Or I was always afraid to talk to you about this, and now like there's a visual component. That's how I kind of feel I would be if I went back to like Iraq or Afghanistan. Like, I would feel like just like, I guess, a certain kind of closure. Not that it would close it, but just like have that feeling of like, man, like, I don't know. It is weird. Yeah, I think I would definitely go back. I would go back. I would.
Yeah, I mean I'm remiss for not asking you about the movie, just because we've hit on so many other things. Are you okay with it? I mean, as you said, it's an adaptation, but do you think it was done fairly?
I do. I really do. Yeah, and it was kind of weird because that was another thing I was apprehensive about, and I wasn't sure how the families would take it. But after talking with Rod, the director, Rod Lurie, and Jake, and because I was brought on to kind of just help with the script, the advisory, like consultant on of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked them, I was like, well, who do you all have playing me? And they're like, we haven't casted you yet. And I was like, well, I'm trying to do some acting. I had done a Netflix original in Cali. I was like auditioning for stuff. I was like, well, I could play myself, and they bought it. So like, yeah, they flew me out, and yeah, Jake, they're all for it. So I was able to like do all that. Or you asked me something. Forget what you asked me.
No, just what your thoughts on the movie were. Yeah, I mean, was it fair?
They asked me just to be like kind of consultant, but during the process and seeing how much detail was put into getting the okay from the families, from the set to the storyline, to everything that, you understand that there's stuff put in there to just make it Hollywood. At the same time, the realness and the relationships built for the okay of the film to be made solidified it enough when I was talking to my buddies that were killed, their parents, and they're saying they were encouraging me to be on set. They're like, we want you to be on it because now we know that at least you'll, and again, I didn't know how much say I had in anything, but it was comforting to families that knew that I was going to be on set because I had actually been there. So they felt that I was going to be the one to tell them, no, it didn't happen like this, or yes, it did happen like this.
Gotcha.
And in a lot of instances, I would have to tell them, like, no, he was killed here, or this is how it was, or no, we wouldn't have done that. And I think that authenticity made me feel good in a way because, again, like the lasting product, I know this film is going to have a longer lifespan than me, and the remembrance of my friends is ultimately going to benefit from that, and that's what I want to ultimately be the end part of the film. But knowing that the realness from my perspective is as close as it can get with, without it being the real thing in terms of storyline, timeline, the way of the attacks, the way the soldiers were killed, the relationships on the base, just little details. I mean, my buddy Mace, his mom actually sent a picture of his dog that we had hanging in the base so we could use in one of the scenes. My buddy Thompson would wear a Ghostbusters shirt. They had a Ghostbusters, like just little details that you wouldn't even know existed unless you knew the guys in the platoon. I felt were so above and beyond detailed, scripted, and professionally curated to be as real as possible. Like once I saw the pieces were in it, and I felt really good about being part of it. And I walked away from it not knowing anything of editing or what was going to become of it. But I was so I swear not humble, but just like so like appreciative. I was so appreciative of how like important it was for the cast and crew to do not a good job, to do a remarkable job for these families.
Right.
And representation of the guys who were killed. And that was weird too, to like, okay, I'm calling this guy Thompson, but it's not Thompson, and we're going to go out and have a beer after this. So it was like having these fake friends that were substituting my real friends was kind of weird, but it was like at the end of it, I felt so thankful, like that the group of guys that I worked with, and even the weapons specialist, Jericho, he's an ex-Ranger, and the other one, Ray, he's a Green Beret. Like just the professionalism, you know, everything to a T. The people that wanted to be there and act as, you know, as my friends that were killed. It was a really peaceful and a therapeutic release in a way too of doing that film. So I was very happy with it took me a while to watch the movie. I finally watched it about a month ago. Watched it, sat through it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't really watch war movies too much anymore, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was done extremely well, the storyline of it. And also hearing from my other buddies in the platoon. I thought, man, that was pretty good. Appreciate you being on it. Like that was awesome for me to hear. So yeah, I think it turned out really well. It's been well received. I think it's given my generation, or you know, this war's generation, a milestone in terms of the battles fought. You know, and something to kind of reflect on, and you know, hopefully it also opens eyes that, you know, we still have soldiers over there. You know, there's still a conflict of us going on. So, you know, hopefully it's kind of brings it to an end and kind of can put not an exclamation point on it, but just seal it appropriately for my duty and from that battle standpoint, at least.
Well, on that note, I mean, I can't thank you enough for being so candid and sharing all of your thoughts, and certainly not holding back. You know, you said from the beginning that it wasn't going to be you to sugarcoat anything. So I certainly appreciate you giving it all and giving us all the insight and all your feelings and emotions. Sometimes this stuff can be more difficult than we give it credit for, right? I mean, I know you like to talk and tell your story, but still, some of the feelings and emotions a day or two later may come back and hit you in ways that you're not really ready for. So I certainly appreciate you spending some time with us and devoting some time to the memory of those guys who are no longer with us. But most of all, man, just thank you for your honesty and being part of this show. I really appreciate it, brother.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for your questions. They're good, and definitely it's always nice to reflect and have insight. So I appreciate the time you took and for having me on. So it was reciprocated, man. Thank you so much.
Daniel Rodriguez, thanks for being part of Hazard Ground.
Appreciate you having me, man.
You've been listening to the Hazard Ground podcast, hosted by Mark Zinno. If you have an interesting story to tell and you'd like to be on the show, send us an email at producer@hazardground.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.